Friends, imagine this. War. The sky is on fire. Every other bomber fails to return to base. Young lads, practically boys, go on missions with little chance of return because their planes are outdated, slow-moving targets for German aces. And then, in this hell, he appears. A phantom plane. A bomber that does not fear enemy fighters. A machine created by a genius in a prison cell. This is not just the story of an aircraft. This is the story of how desperation, genius, and an iron will intertwine to create a weapon of victory. If you want to know how legendary weapons are born and why the Germans feared this machine, stay with us until the end. It's going to be intense. Before we begin, dear viewer, do one simple thing. If you, like me, are interested in pivotal historical moments, the destinies of geniuses and technologies that were ahead of their time, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and write "Let's go" in the comments. This is very important to me because your feedback is the fuel for new research. Agreed? Then let's dive in. The standard genius, how the Tu-2S flipped the skies of the Eastern Front. It all started with a letter. Not an order, not a decree, but a letter. January 1943. Andrei Tupolev, a prisoner, a saboteur, a genius of aviation, picks up a pen. He writes to Stalin. Every letter is a risk. Every word is on the edge. But he knows his brainchild, the Tu-2, has been underestimated, misunderstood, taken out of production. And on the front lines, planes are burning, people are dying. And he, sitting in his Sharashka secret R&D lab, knows it can be different. Imagine this scene. Stalin's office. The Supreme Commander reads a letter from a man he himself imprisoned. And something incredible happens. He agrees. 3 months later, on the 14th of April, Tupolev is given control of plant number 156 in Moscow. The very one where, not long ago, there was an NKVD special prison where engineers worked under guard. Irony? No. A symbol of the era. Geniuses creating the shield of the motherland behind barbed wire. It was here, within walls saturated with fear and despair, that the decommissioned bomber was to be resurrected. This is how the development of the Tu-2S began. An aircraft that would become a legend. A machine that pilots would call the Falcon and the Germans the invulnerable Phantom. Dead end. When 545 kilometers per hour means failure. To understand the scale of the achievement, one must see the depth of the abyss. The first serial Tu-2 planes with M82A engines were good, but not perfect. And in war, not perfect means dead. The State Defense Committee demanded a maximum speed of 550 kilometers per hour at altitude. Behind this number were the lives of crews. Every extra kilometer of speed was a chance to escape a Messerschmitt, to reach the target, to return home. The designers worked like people possessed. They installed upgraded superchargers, tinkered with magnetos, spent hours recalibrating carburetors, polished the aerodynamics to a shine. But the experimental model, the 103rd V, hit a ceiling. 545 kilometers per hour. Just 5 kilometers short. 5 kilometers that separated a brilliant machine from oblivion. Imagine their despair. They saw the limit. It seemed like the end. A wall. And behind it, the death of the entire project. A heart for the Falcon. How Shvetsov's engine changed everything. It is in such situations that breakthroughs are born. What was needed was not an evolutionary step, but a revolutionary leap. And it came from another titan, Arkady Shvetsov. His new M82 FN engine with a direct fuel injection system was a masterpiece. While carburetor systems were finicky, direct injection provided stability, power, and reliability. 1,850 horsepower. This was the thrust that could pull the Tu-2 out of the dead end. The 17th of July, 1943. Test pilot Aishelles takes the upgraded Tu-2 number 103V with the new engines into the air. Takeoff, run, liftoff. At an altitude of 5,050 meters, a breakthrough. 568 kilometers per hour. Grasp the scale. This is not just 23 kilometers over the requirement. This is 14 kilometers per hour more than the German Bf-109F fighter. A bomber outran a fighter. This was a turning point. The Tu-2S became not just fast, it became invulnerable. The philosophy of the standard genius. Genius lies in simplicity. But the main strength of the Tu-2S was not in its engine. It was in its philosophy. Back at the end of 42, Tupolev formulated the concept of the standard type. A stroke of genius in its simplicity. Imagine a perfect, complex tool with 20 functions. Great for a gift, but in a trench, a soldier needs a simple, reliable knife. Tupolev understood 90% of combat missions could be accomplished by a simplified machine. This was engineering asceticism. Everything superfluous was removed from the aircraft. Dive brakes? Removed. Electric starters? By hand. Propeller hub heating? A luxury they could do without. Redundant instruments? An unnecessary extravagance. Even the left rudder trim tab? Scrapped. Separate high and low-pressure hydraulic systems were replaced by a single one. Pipelines were shortened fourfold. The result? Minus 400 kilograms of weight and a saving of 3,000 man-hours on every aircraft. And here is the main paradox. Standardization gave birth not to simplification, but to universality. The Tu-2S became a flying constructor set. Need a dive bomber? Install the dive brakes. Need a reconnaissance plane? Mount a camera. Need a trainer? Swap the navigator station for dual controls. A philosophy ahead of its time. A modular system half a century before the IT revolution. A heart of steel. How the Tu-2S even surprised veteran pilots. Autumn of 1943. Tests at the Air Force Research Institute. The Tu-2S confirms it was born for war. Bomb bay. 1,000 kilograms standard, up to 3,000 kilograms overloaded. 3 times more than the serial Pe-2. And yet, the machine maintained stability and docile handling. Its armament made it a fortress. 2 wing-mounted 20mm SHVK cannons and 3 heavy-caliber UB machine guns for the navigator, radio operator, and in the ventral hatch. Any fighter pilot daring to attack would fly into a deadly trap. But the main thing was survivability. If one engine failed, the Tu-2S did not fall out of the sky or lose control. It continued its flight. Pilots of the 47th Guards Regiment said, a Tu-2 on one engine flies more confidently than a Pe-2 on 2. This quality wasn't in the specifications. This was what distinguished a mere aircraft from a true machine of war. The multifaceted instrument of war. From Königsberg to Berlin. The paradox of the Tu-2S was that it was different for different tasks. Near Königsberg in 44, it carried heavy high-explosive bombs, FAB-1000. Concrete forts cracked like nuts. Where clearing was needed, a BKP-500 cassettes with KS incendiary mixture were used, 136 charges creating a sea of fire over an area the size of an entire city block. On tank routes in East Prussia, pilots struck with precision. Bombs weighing as much as a man turned German columns into piles of scrap metal. Neither the Pe-2 with its modest load, nor the American A-20 Boston could compete with the Tu-2S in accuracy, power, and adaptability. This was not just an aircraft. This was a multifaceted instrument of war. Plant number 156 was a microcosm of the Soviet war economy. Acute shortages of aluminum, steel, skilled labor. The movement of specialists between workshops required NKVD permission. Every engine, every kilogram of weight was accounted for. In these conditions, the standard type philosophy was not a choice, but a necessity. Simplifying the design allowed for mass production by women and teenagers who replaced the men gone to the front. Saving 3,000 man-hours per plane meant thousands of lives saved. Tons of metal saved, weeks of time saved. By the spring of 45, the Tu-2S had become a symbol of inevitable retribution. Its speed, survivability, and power made it the primary frontline bomber of the final stage of the war. But its main legacy is not in its technical characteristics. It is in the lesson of how, under conditions of monstrous deficit, one can create a weapon ahead of its time. The experience of the Tu-2S is the experience of focusing on the essential, an experience that remains relevant today, in business, in technology, in life. True complexity lies in the ability to be simple. True strength lies in the ability to be needed. So, our story has come to an end. The story of a genius born in prison, of an aircraft that became a legend, of the people who gave us victory. If this story touched you, if you felt the breath of that era, subscribe to the channel. For me, that is the best reward. And be sure to write in the comments what amazed you the most. Tupolev's courage, the power of the aircraft, or the fates of the ordinary pilots. Let's discuss it together. Thank you for being with us. Remember history. Be proud of your country. Until we meet again.